Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today's November 5, 2023. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. And we want to thank Ed Palermo for introducing me to today's guest for part two with Bruce McDaniel. That's right, Bruce McDaniel?
That's right, yes.
Yeah, and I want to tell all the people who do watch this, that 3 or 4 viewers, that most of the time I'm not looking at Bruce because I'm taking notes. So somebody wrote in the comments recently, the guy never listens, because he's always looking down. But it is an amazing thing how the viewer wants us to be staring at the little green dot. Like,
well, it's okay. I can imply or infer that your mind is in this direction while your glasses are pointing elsewhere.
Well, Bruce, it's really fun doing a part two with you because for 40 years, I never listened to my interviews. And now I have to because I feel like, well, I better not repeat too much stuff. And it was so fun in the middle of the night last night listening to this part one. So I do encourage people to check that out. And so the first question is, Bruce, what's the function of music?
It depends on whether you're making it or listening to it, I suppose. As somebody who makes it, you make it to communicate anything from what you're feeling or what you want the world to be or what moves you or whatever. But I talk to a lot of people who listen to music in different ways and listen to it completely casually, where it's almost just wallpaper and it's not really a significant thing in their lives. And then, of course, we know so many people, probably ourselves both included, where a few notes can, completely change your outlook on life. So I think it's a relatively simple answer, which is just to try to communicate. Music's purpose is an attempt at communication between people that may not ever be in the same room.
Yeah, that's beautiful because I'm curious, what's the difference between art and science?
Art doesn't have to be repeatable. Science has to be repeatable for it to be valid. Art is ephemeral. Now, we record things and we hang pictures on a wall, but the interaction with art is a in the moment thing. Art becomes science when somebody like, Watson sits down and tears apart every note in Poodle Play or something like that. And then it starts to be science. But the art part is the part that doesn't get dissected. Once you start dissecting, then it's science.
Yeah, it's amazing because this word jujitsu, which I think you're aware of, like judo is push and pull. It's something musicians are always dealing with in a way. How much are you thinking and how much are you going with the flow? So Ju in the word jujitsu, etymologically, Ju means softness and gentleness. Jutsu means art and science. So it's an amazing phenomenon that, I watched Vinny talking on, internet this morning going, it's all, don't think, this line. Don Preston said the same thing when Susie, your cell phone, and shut up. And so, he's saying, oh, don't think. And Don Preston told me this a couple years ago when I interviewed him. He goes, don't think. Well, come on, Bruce, you're the type of musician who is transcribing. You're helping the Ed Palermo big band, play the notes right by getting them on paper so these people can read it. They have to think to a point that where is this how do you deal with this conundrum, I think, of people saying, "Don't think," when you're playing music, when indeed you have to have some Rolodex in your mind of what the heck you're doing?
It depends a lot. Like with the big band, for example, we don't really rehearse. Everybody's sight reading, so there's obviously a lot of uh, focus that prevents you from just relaxing. Now, then it's because it's jazz. There are solo sections where everybody can relax and groove and feel it. But even in the stuff that uh, has a lot of math in it, um, you want to be able to relax into it at a certain point. And a perfect example is like playing Echidna, or playing. It was actually Don't You Ever Watch That Thing. It was one of the first times I think that I was playing with Napoleon, and we were playing. I think it was the Syracuse Jazz Festival, and we're playing Don't You Ever Watch That Thing, and there's a lot of time curiosities in that song, and I chumped something, like I came in an eighth note early or something like that. And after the show, I apologized to Napoleon because we were playing a line together and I came in early. He goes, I played this song a million times and I try to relax when I'm playing it, but you always have to count. You always have to count. There's no point where you let that part go. So the balance is trying to figure out how to get your internal mechanical stuff to happen while on top of it you can make yourself relax and be silly, or make a musical joke, or a flourish that isn't on the page or something like that, without losing that underpinning of solidity, because nothing grooves on its own. Things groove in relation to other things, and you can't. Syncopation doesn't mean anything if there isn't a steady pulse underneath it. And so doing something crazy on top of a bunch of 11s, is
Right.
it is a way to make a groove. But
Yeah.
without the 11s, the thing on top is not grooving.
Yeah. Yeah, that's you just we entertained this quote yesterday, which seems exactly what you're saying. This is John Rupert Firth. You shall know a word by the company it keeps.
Interesting.
That's like you shall know a note by the company it keeps.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all context. And, we respond to that as humans, where if I just play a note out in the air, that note doesn't move you. But if that note in relation to another note might make you happy or sad or angry or whatever. And it's only one more note to make that happen. You don't need 70 other notes. You just need one other one, but you need that other one.
That's like, my favorite is Freddie King's solo to Going Down. Bum, bap, bap. It's like 3 notes. It's like, "Thank you." That's it's amazing. So, I'm still curious because I do feel from talking to you for 2 hours in our first part that you are a kind of linear kinda guy. You're a thinking human, and you're in a profession that you wanna relax and flow, but you're involved. There's notes involved, like Warren says in Baby Snakes. They think Frank's a crazy guy, but there's notes involved.
And
So,
sometimes a lot of them.
sometimes a lot of them. So, this thing about art and science, how it crosses over. Is there a difference between art and science? You know, there's a great quote I love, "Science uncovers facts that can be interpreted many different ways." you know, and all the great science guys like Richard Feynman, who brought the tuba throat singers over to Zappa's studio.
I didn't realize that. Is that true?
Oh yeah.
That's
And
amazing.
yeah, well, maybe he didn't bring them over, but he brought the tuba throat singers to LA, and then they put them in the Rose Bowl parade.
Right.
They had them on Johnny Carson, and then they were hanging out at Frank's. But Feynman is one of these scientists who goes, I'm not going to say this is right and this is correct. I know that there's fudge room in science, but our job is to, you know, actually it gets down to this, and I want to hold off to it, but it's a Thelonious Monk quote. Here's what I found out in the last couple days, that IBM, this is an IT computer scientist who's deep into James Joyce and Finnegan's Wake. So he's like, how did you do this? You know, this is like gibberish, you know, into solid, detailed, proven information. And he said that when IBM first started recruiting people to write code, they asked musicians. Like, now, does this make sense to you? Because now he says it's gone the other way, that now it's not a musician who's so much writing code. And at the beginning it was, you know, Bell Labs asking John Cage. So, you know, just reflect on that a little. What's your reaction? Because there's a conundrum there, it seems. There's a binary or something.
Yeah. So I will say this as someone who has written hundreds of thousands of lines of code in my life. There is a feeling you get when you're writing code that is very, very similar to the feeling that you get when you're writing music. Time vanishes. You know, you start seeing things as a holistic, living, breathing entity, and you start. You know, I've always sort of had a love-hate relationship with the people who say things like, I feel like a conduit for the music when I'm writing it, like I'm not actually making it anymore, you know, like it's coming through me. I always thought that was kind of naive, but that is how it feels. Because what happens, I guess, if I want to be scientific about it, or pseudo-scientific, since I don't know the actual science, is that you get to a place where you start accessing parts of your brain that you don't normally have access to while you're making a cheeseburger for yourself or something. and that part of your brain, once it is engaged, kind of takes over. And it's almost like some kind of psychoactive thing happened, you know, some hallucinogen happened that opened up a part of your brain that you can't normally get to by just brute force. And when you're writing code, or whether you're writing music, you get into this groove where there was a very specific sort of thing you started with, and that seems to be relatively clear with your normal brain. But once you get deep into it, this other part takes over and allows you to do this stuff, and allows you to do more of it and differently and whatever than you ever thought you were going to be able to do when you sat down in the beginning of it. And so I've definitely had the feeling that there is a connection between music and writing computer code, but I don't think it's because there's a skill set involved. I think it's because of this concept that people that write music or play music have a side door where they can get to this part of their brain that allows them to be creative in this way. And I'll tell you a little anecdote of something that happened a few months ago. I was playing with Todd Rundgren, and we were in Todd lives on Kauai in Hawaii, and so we were at Todd's house rehearsing. Now, Todd designed the first graphics tablet that Apple wound up buying. You know, Todd wrote software that basically for Apple, you know, alongside of Apple, tons of software in the olden times. He wrote code that did the first like graphics morphing for video, you know, for videotape and stuff like that. So he's written just tons and tons of code in his life. He's in the midst of writing something right now, and we would be rehearsing, and the last note of the song, the last song that we would rehearse, was still sort of ringing in the room, and he just went like this. He's turned around and back to his computer, and he has a giant monitor, and he just started coding. And I think that's because his brain's already there. Like, it's not like he was ditching us because, like, I don't want to talk to you guys anymore. It's that his brain was already in this place that allowed him to access the things he needed to write these massive, massive chunks of code. And he just spun around in his chair and started working. And we all kind of like gently filed out of the room. but it was fascinating to watch.
Wow, it sounds like effects precede causes. But that's beautiful what you said. It really seemed to touch on this thing that Vinny and Don Preston are saying, don't think. It's like, yeah, right. That's romanticizing that process. Is that similar to what they're saying? The difference that what you differentiated between writing code and writing music? Is that?
I think so. I think it's all part and parcel of the same thing. I think it's a feeling you get. And the feeling you get is, I am not actively thinking.
Yeah.
It's just happening.
Yeah.
But of course, you know, everything we do, your brain is involved. It's just how it feels when it's right. And when, you know, every musician can tell you that when it feels best, it feels like you're not thinking. It feels like you're not doing anything. But of course, you're processing all of this. It's just you're processing it in a way that seems less, you know, mechanical.
Yeah. Okay, so now on to Aaron Copeland says the 4 ingredients of music are melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color. In non-academic terms, common person on the street, what is tone color?
So I'm sure you could ask, you know, 8 different musicians this and get 8 different answers, but
I have.
If you use the analogy of a painting,
Yeah.
right? You are, as a painter, have a palette to work from, and a physical palette to work from, and that's, you've got your colors on there, and that how you mix those colors is what the mood is on that canvas. With music, it's the same. Sometimes you like to limit your palette of tonal variation. Like, let's take an early Beatles record. First, you know, take Please Please Me or something. It's a very limited palette. It's 2 guitars, bass, drums, harmonica, vocals. That's the whole palette for the whole album. That's the palette. Maybe George Martin overdubbed the piano part somewhere, but every song has effectively the same exact tonal palette, right? The same exact set of sounds in the same room, recorded with the same microphones. It's the same tonal palette. Skip ahead 3 years, 4 years, when the Beatles are sitting there making Sgt. Pepper, and they're like, well, that palette is not adequate to communicate the array of feelings that we want to deliver in this record. So what do we got to play with around here? We got a harpsichord, cool, bring that over here. We've got a mellotron, well, the mellotron was a little later, but oh no, because the mellotron is on Strawberry Fields, and that was recorded during Sgt. Pepper. So okay, I'm vindicated for a moment. George is over there in the corner with a sitar, whatever. And all of these elements, if you think about them as a standalone instrument, that's fine. You can do that. But if you think about them as part of a tonal palette that then you can mix together and create a combination of sounds that is unique for the piece of art you're trying to make, that to me is what the tonal palette is. I recently did a record. I'm not quite finished, but I intentionally limited it to bass, drums, Hammond organ, mini moog, and guitar. That's all that's on it. And it's a challenge to try and create the tonal variation that you want to create with a limited palette. But it's much more satisfying to me to do that than to have an unlimited palette and go into like meltdown of, well, maybe I should add this koto onto it, or you know what, that egg shaker's lying over in the corner, let me add that, or what, you know, there's a point where you just go, am I just piling things on, or am I making a tonal picture? If you only have 4 or 5 things to work with, you're making that tonal picture. You're not just throwing the kitchen sink at it.
Yeah. Some people say like 40 years of asking that question, then you layer them and you get 20 different musicians saying what is tone color, because that was really good. I appreciate that, Bruce. That's what I like. You're very articulate and concise, and I understand what you're saying, so I appreciate that. But in those 4 elements that Copeland is discerning, when you're writing a Bruce song, not an assignment, just you composition, how do you integrate those 4 elements, or how do you focus? Is there a tendency to want to do this harmony, rhythm, melody, tone color first? You know, I know there's other elements like lyric writing, but just in composing the music, those 4 basic elements, how do you focus and integrate?
That's an interesting question, because it is different if I'm writing something versus if I am I don't want this to sound as mechanical as it is, but like if I'm doing an arrangement for the big band, for example, the tonal palette is already there, right? I know what instruments are there. That's 16 instruments are there. And so I tend to start with the rhythm section, and I write the rhythm section, and then I write all the horn parts on top. I think most writers will tell you that they don't have a standard way of doing things. Sometimes melody comes to them, sometimes a feeling comes to them, sometimes a groove comes to them, sometimes a lyric comes. And I think depending on what comes first, naturally, you then have to take the approach of how do I build around that, and that can be something that is sort of indicated to you by whatever came to you first. If a melodic interval happens in the melody that you thought about, that can give you a lot of clues as to where you want to go with it. If you write a lyric first and that lyric has certain words in it, well, those, you know, if the words are really dark, you probably are going to want to stick with a darker palette to write with. You're not going to then put like circus music underneath it. Although that might be what you want to do. You might want to juxtapose the things. But again, it's still giving you information that you're then taking and running with. So I don't have a here's how I start. It's usually, and again, going back to this like idea of I'm a conduit for something. Well, the thing that comes to you first is usually comes to you without any effort. You're walking around the house, or you know, doing laundry, or in your car or whatever, and something comes to you, however it got there, and you stop for a minute and go, that's good, that's interesting, let me hold on to that. And sometimes you like write it down, or you sing it into your iPhone or whatever.
That's they asked the Brill Building songwriters what came first, the music or the lyrics. They go, the phone call.
Yeah. Well, but you know, that is a real thing. Like, it is a very different feeling from a mentality of songwriting as a job or music writing as a
Yeah,
job, where you go, I've got to write something tomorrow.
yeah,
10 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to have my coffee in front of me and I'm going to write something.
yeah,
If that happens, I probably would have a much more clinical
yeah,
approach to it. But most of the time, if I'm writing something for myself, it's because something just came to me and
yeah,
I didn't want to throw it away.
yeah. The 3 tenets of music, my friend said, the 3 T's: technique, theory, and taste. You've learned the technique, you know the theory. How does one acquire taste?
A lot of it is I think just in straight up environmental, exposure to things. I grew up in a house with two, professional musicians, Juilliard parents, pianists, and what they listened to, I listened to just by virtue of being there. So I listened to, Stravinsky and Varese and things like that in my house, and Weber in particular. My dad, Alban Berg. My dad loved Alban Berg, and so I would listen to a lot of that, and he had the same amount of love for Miles Davis and Coltrane and Monk and whoever. So I listened to a lot of that, and I think if you wind up listening to a lot of specific things, your taste becomes informed by it. But to me, the more interesting thing that happens is when you are struck by something clear out of the blue, much later in life, when you've already had all of your, your what you would think your tastes formed, and you hear something, go, what is that? I love it. And I have no reference for why I love it.
Yeah,
And I got to figure out now why I love it. Well, this sounds fantastic, but it doesn't sound like anything that I would ever have said I liked before.
yeah,
So I think there's an openness you have to have. I often tell people, friends of mine who say they like a particular band or whatever, that
yeah,
everything I've heard, I go, it's not for me. I don't like that. It's just not it. But I'll always say, send me something. Send me the
yeah,
song. Send me the one track that's going to
yeah,
make me go, you know what? That is pretty interesting.
yeah,
Maybe it's worth a deeper dive.
yeah.
And not often, but every once in a while, something hits like that.
It hits you like, why did Frank steal the Shags record after the DJ played it for him? And then most people like me and everybody like listen to Shags and kind of love it. It was sort of like, what the heck? I loved it.
Yeah.
But I finally hit a guy, he goes, what do you think of the Shags? He goes, I don't get it. I don't get that. And it's like, well, that's normal because most people don't.
Right. Right. And
No.
there's lots of stuff that most people seem to get that I don't get.
Yeah.
So I'm fine with that. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm also not elitist about it. Like,
Yeah.
if you love Taylor Swift and it makes you happy and improves the quality of your life, fantastic.
It's doing its job. That's the
It
simple
it,
thing.
it doesn't do that for
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
but nothing should do that for everybody. There's no,
Yeah.
everybody doesn't have the same tastes and the same
Yeah.
needs and the same whatever.
Well, this word taste continues. McLuhan said two things. Song is slowed down speech. The reason cultures have different musical taste is ultimately connected to language difference. So, yeah, I would love to get your thoughts on that because it's sort of like song is slowed down speech. Well, okay, he's talking metaphorically. It's more, and you can comment on that, but it's more the reasons cultures have different musical taste is ultimately connected to language difference. Any comment?
I, I think there's probably some validity to that. Certainly, if we listen to music from, the Far East or from India or whatever, and it, in particular, when we listen to singing from those parts of the world, I think we can pretty easily jump to a connection between the sound of speech and the sound of the singing. But I also think that there's the more interesting part of it to me is, every generation says that the younger generation's speech is worse than theirs.
Yeah.
And the younger generation's music is worse than theirs. And every generation for the last, how many hundreds
Yeah.
of years has said those things. And I think those things are connected. I
Yeah.
think the means by which each generation modifies language and modifies communication is reflected in music.
Yeah.
And
You're brilliant. Yeah.
I think that's a much more sort of, to me, an obvious tie than the language itself.
Yeah. It's like the tuba throat singers, which we were talking about. That's transcendental. When I heard it, it put me in another, like,
Yeah.
wow. They sing about three things: their boot, snow, and the horses. And it's like, well, yeah, but it doesn't matter if I know the words. So the question is, what's more fundamental, language or music?
I'm going to guess, I'm going to throw my anthropology hat in the ring and guess that there was more developed music before there was developed speech. And I don't mean music like, Beethoven. I mean music like the sounds of people sitting around, our hominid ancestors sitting
Yeah.
around a fire, making something that made them feel a thing.
Yeah.
Uh, and,
That's
and I'm going to guess that was more well developed before what we would consider language.
Bruce, brilliant, because Mickey Hart wrote that book, and he says, "Well, we made drumming to tell, hey, there's people coming to get our food,
Right.
so it communicates something." And my friend, I says, "What's the function of music?" He says, "To dance." And so that is, there's a great cliche I repeat: if you can't say it, sing it. If you can't sing it, dance it.
There are still, occasionally we find isolated cultures. And some of the isolated cultures that we have found don't really have a spoken language. They have, they have noises that they might make that indicate something, but they also do make music. Whether it's just rhythmic or whether it's melodic. Yeah. So I gotta feel like music is more fundamental.
Yeah. Tell me an instrumental that makes you laugh. It can't be Spike Jones. It's an instrumental.
I mean, Spike Jones does make me laugh, but that's a good question. I'm off the top of my head, like nothing's immediately coming to mind, but there's some PDQ box stuff that really made me laugh.
There you go. I do. That does come up. I love it. PDQ box. Man, you know everything. We're on the same line. So this leads to Monk, because I think Thelonious Monk does make me laugh. Like,
yeah, there's
that's like
sure.
funny.
There's lots of humor in Monk and lots of like sarcasm in his playing.
Yeah, yeah. And my friend nailed it. He said Monk heard all the notes Charlie Parker heard, but only decided to play some of them.
I would say he heard the same notes that Charlie Parker heard, but is slightly dyslexic.
And that's why, we invented dyslexia. I got Lex Dixie. We invented that. Who knows if that, it's like when the crazy people in your village were the shaman, and then all of a sudden they invented mental illness. They go, oh no, you're mentally ill. You're not the shaman anymore. So fine line. But the point is, Monk said, and this is what we were talking about earlier, there are no wrong notes. Any comment?
I think that's basically true. I think it's all context, though. There's certainly wrong notes that can be played within Happy Birthday that everyone would agree that's not the right note. Whether or not that's the note you intended and you intended it for a particular effect is a different question. I think it's pretty funny to put a wrong note into Happy Birthday and see what it does, but then it's not wrong anymore because you did it on purpose.
Yeah.
And there are lots of notes, you know, that in a particular context would be, you know, very diatonic, but they're wrong from the composer's perspective because they didn't create any, you know, any rub or any feeling in you. It just created blandness. That's, you know, like Frank used to say about putting eyebrows on something. If something is too square, it doesn't, every note might be right, but it doesn't make you feel anything.
Yeah.
You got to put a little edge on things sometimes to get the reaction you want to get.
Yeah. That's Hadda Brooks, the great, she was the rehearsal pianist for Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire, but she's an amazing boogie woogie pianist, played for 6 decades. We said, what about Monk's comment, there are no wrong notes? She goes, no, there's wrong notes. It's just how good you cover them up.
Well,
and
yeah,
you know,
we've all done that.
Yeah, that's Herbie. You know, when Herbie Hancock, he would lectured on it when he hit the wrong note, and Miles
was like,
whoa, and then he just moved it. He says, yeah, it's just covered up. So that leads into Miles and P-Funk. Miles talked about the space between notes. In fact, Monk said the loudest sound in the universe is silence. And George Clinton says funk is the absence of.
yeah.
Bruce, how do you know when not to play? How do you integrate silence in music?
Sometimes poorly, let's put it that way. As I get older, I try to be better about that and try to incorporate more silence. And, you know, that silence in music is a thing that allows control to be turned over to the listener, for the listener to create their own expectation of what's coming next. And the best part of successful music writing is when the listener is expecting something and something surprises them. Yeah. But you can't have that if it's all dense, because you never relinquish control back to the listener to, you know, to create those moments of expectation. So in a show, it feels more natural sometimes to just like lay back a little bit and stop playing and vibe the audience.
Yeah.
See what they're grooving on, and then give them a little shot of something, you know. Again, this is a lot of taste here. I never cared to listen to, you know, Al Di Meola or something like that. It was too many notes. I admire the technique. Yeah. I just don't feel like I'm part of that experience. I feel very passive as a listener when I listen to something like that. Whereas if I listen to Monk, I'm drawn in.
Yeah. Because
I am now made part of the whole experience, where there's a hole there, and it makes you lean your head a little forward and go, well, what's going to happen here? And then he puts his elbow on the keys, you know.
Dude, you're really good with words and being articulate about a form. Like Igor Stravinsky said, music doesn't mean anything, and he gave a whole lecture on it, but it can mean something, and it does, and how knee deep you're into it, in playing it and arranging it and being able to talk about it. It doesn't, you're not, you know, so this is actually, and I agree with you. I mean, when Yngwie came out, we said McLaughlin did this years ago with a lot more taste.
Yeah, well, that's McLaughlin could play all those notes, but he also leaves a lot of spaces.
Yeah. So this is Ruth. You got ESP because you anticipated this, and this is Ruth Draper. And I've watched you in that video we were talking about, where you're playing this hard, difficult Zappa song, and there's a part where you don't play and you dance. You move around. So this is Ruth Draper. She says the key is to bring the audience up onto the stage and into the scene with you. It is they who must give you even more than you give them in the way of imagination and creative power. Hey, that sounds good, but how do you do it?
It, again, it's one of the things I try to do better over the course of my rapidly aging body, making it through these shows. But the big band plays regularly at this club in upstate New York called the Falcon.
Yeah.
In Marlboro. And it is a wonderful place. And we consider it our Garrick Theater.
Yeah.
Where we feel the complete freedom, both from the club management and from the audience, to do whatever we want. And that freedom is intoxicating. But it's pretty useless if it's just us looking at each other doing it. We try to really engage the audience in that participatory element of the show. We're not having people from the audience come up on stage like Frank used to do at the Garrick, and we're not shooting, whipped cream out of a giraffe's butt at the audience. Although we do occasionally blur that line a little bit, but
thank God, man. That's one of the problems with most Zappa covers bands is they just play the notes. It's like, wait a minute.
But yeah, we try, like, from note one at a show to drag the audience kicking and screaming into our idea of what the show is going to be tonight, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. And it's never the audience fault when it doesn't work. We either had a crazy idea that it just didn't gel, or we didn't execute it as well as we would have liked, or we missed the timing on some jokes or whatever it is. But it's never the audience's fault. It's always your fault. Like getting that audience to, I always say, nobody comes to your show wanting to have a bad time.
Yep.
So if you can't get them on your side, it's your fault. It's not their fault. So we try to engage everybody in the house, but as always, in any show, you can only see the people in the first couple of rows.
Yeah.
So it is really important to look down and see what people are reacting to and see if somebody's having fun. And if they're not having fun, make them have fun.
It's an awareness level. And Bruce, I wanted to mention how I go to George Clinton Parliament Funkadelic shows. He's got 30 people on stage and half of them are singing, and he holds the microphone to the audience and the audience sings every word. It's like, good job. Hey, I don't even have to sing. But here's Leonard Cohen. The only way you can sell a concert is if you put yourself at risk. And if you don't do that, people know. What role does risk playing take in your creative process?
That is really right on the money, by the way. That quote is really right on the money, because an audience will sniff it out if you're phoning it in, like in a second. And we've all seen it as audience members, when we've gone to shows and been like, nah. I mean, they played all the right notes or whatever, but no, there's nothing. There was no danger in that show.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things I love about the big band is because we don't really rehearse, like our rehearsal is the sound check.
Wow.
And so by the time we get to the actual show, we really don't know what's going to happen. And there's a lot of risk there, but we trust the audience.
Yeah.
Because we also trust that the audience knows that the reason they're coming to see a live show is for the opportunity to see something that is never going to happen again. That
Yep.
the things that, because if you might as well just go listen to the record if you want it to be repeatable that way.
Yeah.
And again, this is back to the repeatability of art and science. That's why science is a specific thing. Like, we want to present something that is special for that crowd that night, or else there's no point in doing it. We've never played the same show twice, really. Like, we may do within the court, if we play 2 shows in a week, we may play very similar, skip a song here or there, add a song here or there, but they're for totally different audiences, so they have a completely different feel to them. The way we actually execute the show is going to be wildly different, even if the set list is the same. So I think it's super important, and it's also really important for the band to feel like they're having a good time.
Yeah.
Because if they're just going through the motions, like, why do it?
Yeah.
It's one thing if you're Cher. I don't want to slag Cher, because I saw Cher's show relatively recently and it was great. But
Was it good?
but I'm saying if you're doing that Vegas kind of very meticulously the same every night show, you're doing that to make a living. Like you're not getting a lot of artistic satisfaction about that show after the 100th time that you've done it. Whereas we don't ever get to that point with a show. Even if we do a show twice, maybe in a week for different audiences, that's the same, we still don't get it right by the second show.
Right.
Like, we're still a ways away from any kind of level of perfection.
Well, what does courage mean to you now?
Courage is a weird word, because I think it implies a sort of conscious choice to not be fearful of things. I think a little fear is healthy. I don't have stage fright. That's not a thing that I ever suffered with, and I know some people are paralyzed by it, and I don't mean to make light of it. I just don't have it. Like, maybe that's like a deficient part of my brain. It's not like I'm not scared of other things. It's not like I'm one of these guys that has no fear response to their daredevils all the time. That's not me. But being on stage is a relatively comfortable thing for me. I don't really get stage fright. So I think courage is, for me, in these shows, the idea of trusting the audience, and the idea of feeling like you're not just going to hope to execute it correctly. You're going to try to have fun with it, and you're going to try and bring something that's not on the page, and bring something that was not rehearsed, without upsetting the apple cart, making it a special thing.
Yeah.
And not being afraid for that to fall on its face, because it will fall on its face sometimes. Yeah. That's okay.
I like you bringing in the emotion of fear there, in that it fits perfect with this. Viola Spolin, who is she did social work in Chicago, and sort of invented comedy improv by doing role playing, and spawned Second City and Saturday Night Live. She said, if the audience cannot see your struggle to achieve something, they cannot root for you to achieve it. What role does struggle play in your creative process?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, because I there's also this idea of, that people have said for years, never let them see you sweat, but I think it's okay to look like you're sweating. There's certain people that you want to be smooth. You want, pick some singer, who's really a smooth singer. I don't know who that would be. I'm trying to think of somebody like Michael McDonald or somebody, like who you think you just want him to be smooth, because that's part of the art.
Yeah.
Is that feeling that you get of safety in the sound of his voice.
Yeah.
And that's very different from seeing, the Ramones or something. It's a different feeling that you want to get out of it. So, struggle, I think it comes down to what the performer's goal is. I don't think we ever want to see orchestras that are playing Ravel look like they're having a hard time with it.
Yeah.
I think we want it to be sweet and beautiful and whatever. And I don't think we ever want to see our punk rock bands like phoning it in and looking really smooth. I think we want a little disarray. I don't think nobody wants to see the Stones sound like a Stones record. I think you want to see the Stones having every minute on stage look like they're about to fall down off the stage or like miss the, cues or whatever, which is why the Stones with, a young, hip, capable rhythm section behind them is weird. Like,
yeah, I was just going to ask you, what's your take on auto-tuning Mick's voice on the latest album?
I have intentionally ostriched my head into the ground and have not heard
it. Smart move, dude. Okay, so here's Frank, LA Free Press in the summer of '69. They asked him about him talking about Pauline Oliveros, her work with sound above the audio and below, creating a mass. Frank said, not that it created a mass, it created something audible. It produced a sum indifference tone, which happened to be located within the audible frequency range. By combining something so high you couldn't hear it and something so low you couldn't hear it, it yields something in the middle you could hear. Whether or not you liked what you hear is another question. The concept is brilliant.
Yes.
Talk about this sum indifference tone that Frank's talking about.
Well, so any sound is a wave, and waves resonate at different frequencies. And when two waves are playing in the same room at different frequencies, there will be occasional collisions. And those collisions will happen at a third frequency. And it doesn't even have to be the fundamental note creating that. There are, in any note, there's the fundamental frequency, and then there are harmonics above it that are, for lack of a better term, integral parts of that fundamental frequency, and they can collide. And it looks just like two waves on a pond that eventually hit each other and create like a third wave. And if you have a wave that has a very, very low frequency, 40 hertz or something, which 40 is still within the realm of human hearing. So let's say 10 hertz. And then a frequency that's above the range of human hearing, let's say 30,000 hertz. There is a point where those two waves in the same room will hit each other. And that may be within the range of human hearing. And you can choose as an artist to use this. And it happens a lot when you're mixing records. Because it happens inadvertently. And you start to get buildups of frequencies. And your mix starts to sound muddy. And you're like, well, why is it there's nothing playing in that muddy area that I'm hearing? But it's the combination of other instruments and their waves colliding to create a sound in that third location or fifth location or sixth or however many instruments are playing. And so what you wind up doing is figuring out, well, which collisions are making that accumulation of sound happening, and using an equalizer to cut those out so that they don't run into each other anymore.
Yeah.
And that makes it go away, and it makes your mix less muddy, or you forget to do it and it makes your mix sound like garbage.
Is that wavicle? Because Frank talked about the wavicle.
I'm not sure what he means by that.
I'm going to send you this interview where he talks about wavicle. That was good, Bruce. Now, Ben Ratliff is a music writer, and he says, I mean sound as it has long functioned among jazz players, as a mystical term of art, as in every musician finally needs a sound, a full and sensible embodiment of their artistic personality, such that it can be heard at best in a single note.
Yeah.
So me or you could hear Miles go, "Oh, that's Miles."
Yep.
And Ben said, "He's fragile and pointed."
Yeah.
So he condenses it down into one or two words. Train is slightly undercooked and urgent. If a music writer was describing Bruce's sound, what two words would you be happy and go, "He got me"?
Boy, that's a lifelong aspiration, is to sound like yourself. Because
Yeah.
you start off when you're playing sounding like everybody that you listen to. And it took me a long time to sort of figure out uh, what bits of other people's sound made their way into my playing.
Yeah.
And it's only since I've been playing with Todd Rundgren that I realized a lot of it is Todd Rundgren. And I don't know why. Because
Yeah.
and I mean, certainly I listen to endless amounts of Todd, but I didn't really listen to Todd when I was learning to play the guitar very much. I listened to Todd when I was learning to play the piano.
Yeah.
And I much more I wouldn't be at all surprised if I sounded like Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath, or if I sounded like Brian May from Queen, or if I
Yeah.
sounded like, whoever that are people that made me want to play the guitar.
Yeah.
So I really think that it has much less to do with who you're trying to emulate than whose musical sensibilities you've absorbed in you and allowed to come back out through you. And so I think, like, the thing with Todd is, so many of his musical sensibilities became part of my ethos for writing music, or whatever, that it was not his guitar playing, it was his musical concepts came out the way they come out of him, the same way. And I don't sound like him.
Yeah.
But musically, the things that I do are much more like something he would do than something, Tony Iommi would do.
Yeah.
So in short, though, the goal that any musician should have, like you mentioned in the quote, is to be able to let go of the baggage
Yep.
of, do I sound like my heroes?
Yeah.
And say, how I sound is the way I should sound, and be that. Now let's go back 2 questions. That's courage.
Yes.
Courage is saying, how I'm going to sound is how I'm going to sound. And if you like it, you like me. And if you don't, no harm, no foul. You're not going to not like me because you don't like Eric Clapton. Yeah. You're going to not like me because you don't like me. And that's courage.
Yeah. That's interesting, because that's Harold Bloom said, you absorb your influence, then you abandon them.
Yes.
But I mean, Bruce, if someone heard your music and they go, "Oh, that's blank and blank," what 2 words would you like? You go, "Oh, they sort of got what I like to hear those words describe my sound."
I would like, okay, I'm going to just throw the first things that come into my head. I would like somebody to say that I sound, this is more than 2 words, but it's 2 thoughts.
Yeah.
Smart, but slightly out of control. Yeah. Smart, but not contrived. How about that?
Yeah. Not contrived or out of control. That's there's a word in Finnegan's Wake where he combines chaos and cosmos. It's chaosmos.
Okay, so I'm okay with chaotic too. So, like, smart but chaotic.
Yes,
that I would be very comfortable with.
Yeah, that's very good. Okay. So I talked to Michael Apted 40 years ago, and I says, "Why do rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast? most people don't know Abel Gance invented rapid montage in 1922 in France, but it flourished in the 80s to the point where Marty Scorsese said, I cut my films faster because of MTV.
Sure.
Michael Apted said, because people have learned to take in information faster. So I asked this question with bias. Can humans actually learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
Uh, I'm not so sure it's that we learn to take in information faster. I think we learn to take in certain types of information faster by being exposed to them. Uh, I, I, again, this becomes this generational thing of like, I can't watch a movie now. Movies when I was a kid, were so much better, or so, that's the typical sort of thing, is that the method of communication changes generationally. And that particularly with the video editing and not just the editing, but just like the style in general, and the saturation of color, and all of this changes generationally. There was a really interesting article recently about why all film and TV now has a different color palette than it had 10 years ago. And some of it has to do with the technical aspects of streaming and things like that, but it also has to do with, well, this is how people who are the test audiences react positively. They see a certain color palette, and they say, I liked that movie because I like the way it looked. I'm less inclined to think that we're learning anything any faster. I think we're just engaging, different parts of our senses in different ways as time goes on. I mean, look, we're in the TikTok level of communication era. And a lot of people will say, well, that means we're in the short attention span era. And yeah, I would certainly say that there's some truth to that. But I also think there's an aspect to it of, I'm trying to, as a human being, ingest more total content. And if I just ingest the Reader's Digest version of everything, now for the people that are young that don't know what Reader's Digest is, but the Reader's Digest version of everything in my life, so that I can feel at the end of the day like I've ingested all the information that is available to me about the things I care about.
Yeah, that was really good. When Spinal Tap got a test audience reaction, someone wrote on the card, good movie, but you should have got a better rock band.
Well, there was a good deal of confusion in the early showings of Spinal Tap, because it didn't come out with great fanfare or anything. Like, people didn't really know what it was, and a lot of the audiences were very confused that they'd never heard of this band that had clearly been around for decades.
Yeah. Well, the real question there was, is it literally possible for humans to multitask?
Yes. But I'm gonna say that from just a purely scientific point of view, that like everything else in the universe, our brains are macroscopic but quantum objects that have superposition and elements of quantum curiosities in them that allow multiple things to be happening at the same time. So I'll allow it. I'll allow it.
What was the motive of the cave artists? And it's interesting, we have documentation, but we don't have cave music recorded per se, and we don't have cave dance. But your general hunch or guess, what was the motive of the cave artist?
I think it's probably pretty simplistic. Like it's just a way to tell a story without a form of writing that is, like a modern form of writing. I think it's we had this incredible encounter with these wildebeest or whatever, and I'll be dead soon, but I don't want this story to be forgotten. I think that's why we make most art, whether it's cave art or high art, is we have a thought that we don't want to die when we die.
Yeah.
And I say we, but I'm not going anywhere, just so you know. I'm sticking around.
Dude, you have major ESP here, because Hollis Frampton, experimental filmmaker, said narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die. Can you forget to die?
I'm forgetting. I always say, quote the line from Pulp Fiction, that I'm going to just walk the earth like Kane from Kung Fu. You know, that's my philosophy. You're going to have to take me kicking and screaming. I'm sticking around, but I do feel like there is definitely an element of awareness of mortality that prompts us to create things.
Yeah.
I think if we knew we were immortal, it'd really be hard to get motivated to take the garbage out. You know, this is, as much as I feel like I'm probably immortal, I'm hedging my bets here. You know, I do think that, you know, certainly you see it with really creative people who may be terminally ill, the urgency to get work done. And, you know, you can imagine, well, you know, if I was terminally ill, I'd just be like, screw it, I'm not going to work. I'm just going to like hang out on the beach and have some margaritas and wait for, you know, the Grim Reaper to come. But so many creative people that we've seen, knowing they had limited time, I mean, very limited time, more limited than the rest of us, went into like overdrive of work.
Yeah.
And I think that's the natural instinct. The natural instinct is to leave something behind, not out of vanity, but out of like, what was my purpose here if I don't leave anything behind? If there isn't something for somebody to trip over.
Yeah. Trip over that. Well, I really hope we meet someday in person, Bruce, because this has been totally amazing. What's more important, conviction or compromise?
I think conviction makes it easier to compromise. I think if you are uncertain about your belief system, your desires, your whatever, you tend to be more defensive about them because you have the anxiety that comes along with being uncertain. I think if you have strong conviction, it's easy for you to compromise because you know it doesn't affect how deeply you believe something.
Yeah.
It just becomes a practical perspective.
Yeah.
So that's, there you go. I'm standing on that. I'm dying on that hill.
Bruce, you've accomplished a lot. How do you rate these three elements, luck, skill, and ambition? What played the biggest role, second and third?
I think it's ambition, skill, and luck. I think luck only comes into play when you are prepared.
Yeah.
And I may have said this to you in our last discussion. I don't remember. It's been so long, but you know, my dad gave me very valuable advice when I was a kid, and he said, you know, be prepared for the gig that you want, because it may never come. It probably won't. But if it comes and you're not prepared, you will be kicking yourself for the rest of your life.
Really good advice, man. That is super. I don't think you said in the first part, be prepared for the gig you want. That's like manifesting, which, yeah, that's good. Because, you know, the thing you said about luck too is Gary Player, the golfer, the more you practice, the luckier you get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And ambition is very important in this too, because you can be very skilled and be in your bedroom, being the best guitar player on earth. And that's great. If that is the satisfaction, if that gives you all the satisfaction you want out of playing that instrument, or be the best free throw shooter in the world and only shoot in your driveway. That's fine if that satisfies you. But when you have ambition for the gig that you want and realize your skill level is not adequate to get that gig, that pushes you to increase your skill level. It's not the other way around. Skill level never increases your ambition.
That's like Vinny walked into Sting's audition. He goes, "I'm your next drummer."
Yeah.
T.S. Eliot said poetry's outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
For the most part, it's in food and beer, but
that is a great answer. Never got.
But you know what? It's kind of true in the sense that
there's nothing wrong with that.
No, I'll expand that. It's food, travel, and beer.
Okay, there you go.
But that is the thing that creates the monologue or dialogue. It depends on whether you think you're a brain and body separatist, I guess. But that creates that inner discussion of, I got to do this thing. You know why? Because I want to go to Spain and eat some tapas next month. And if I don't push myself to write these charts or do this arrangement or do this tour or whatever, I don't get that reward.
Yeah.
So that's the discussion I have with myself all the time is, I'm fine. I could just be hanging around the house and write a little, play the guitar, but there's stuff I want to do that is enabled by hard work.
Yeah.
So
where'd you get your work ethic?
My dad was a very, very hard worker.
Yeah. That's where most of us get it. But the third paragraph down in Wikipedia for work ethic, it says, this may be a scam from consumer capitalists.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's certainly something to that. And, my dad definitely had, both of my parents definitely had a war era forged work ethic.
Yep.
And so did their parents.
Yep.
But my mother's parents came from relative poverty, and I don't mean that to be as extreme as it sounds, but you know what I mean. They were not middle class folks. They were below that.
Yeah.
And my mother's father, was a self-made man, started a successful business and raised a family and put everybody through college and blah, 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 and did all that stuff. And was an admirable person on top of that.
Yes.
He was a good man on top of it.
Yeah.
And I remember watching him as a little kid and really admiring him. And my father's father also, and I don't mean to leave out the grandmothers here because they were incredible women, but as far as my particular work ethic goes, both of my grandmothers were of an era where women were not working. They were not in the workplace very much. So, I'm focusing on the grandfathers here. My father's father was also a great musician, but kind of subjugated that. He was a brilliant painter and used his talents to work in the graphic design field. And we're talking back in the 30s, 40s, 50s. And made enough money doing that. He was very successful to where he could then be a full-time artist, full-time painter, which he was. But my grandfather was very specific to my father about not wanting him to ever play popular music. No jazz, no popular music, only classical music.
Wow.
And the reason for that was my grandfather used to play jazz in whorehouses and speakeasies and all kinds of stuff and didn't want that life for my father. He saw the dark underbelly of the jazz world, And so it was really interesting to see how he drove my dad to be a classical musician when all my dad wanted to be was a jazz pianist. All my
Wow.
dad ever wanted to be was like Art Tatum or something, you know. But
Nice.
um, but indeed, he was a classical pianist and classical composer and all of that. And seeing the way it turned on him when I was playing music, where he never discouraged me from playing any particular kind of music. He discouraged me from being a musician. He said I should have a fallback plan.
Yeah.
But we would be playing Black Sabbath in my basement with my teenage band. I know it was not his cup of tea. But he never said, "Don't play that. That's bad music," you know.
That is cool. Yeah, we're lucky we had good dads. Well, this is the topic you touched on, but I'm really curious because I'm gonna flush it out. To my film heroes go, ignore yourself. Their mantra is there is no self-expression. Cecil Taylor says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. Is art making more self-expression or more you're a vehicle for whatever cultures, technologies, and environments are dominant?
I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. I think that's how you develop your concept of what you you have as self-expression is by how you ingest your culture and your
Yeah.
your surroundings. Um, I think depending on your particular bent, though, one may be more obvious than the other. You know, if you're John Mayer writing songs about heartbreak all day, that's very different than if you're Bob Dylan writing songs about injustice and whatever. But I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. I think it just comes down to what your mouthpiece methodology is. If you're Donald Fagen and you want to have thinly veiled threats and angst about everything around you, but disguised in beautiful poetry, that's cool too. Like however you want to do it, that's your particular prerogative.
Well, that's the real hidden question here, Bruce, is can art making be egoless?
I'm not sure it should be. Uh, I mean, there's certainly the thing of separate the art from the artist,
Yeah.
but I don't think I think egoless art. I think we're starting to encounter it. I think the AI art that we're seeing, I think a lot of that could easily be defined as egoless art.
Yeah.
It's merely creating art based on absorbing other art, but not providing any viewpoint,
Yeah.
and just replicating what it thinks art is. Uh, I think egoless art isn't really art; it's product. If we, I don't want to slag Bobby Goldsboro or Bobby Sherman or something from something from the '60s that was the most sort of banal pop thing that was clearly constructed without a point of view or whatever. It was constructed to sell records to teenagers. That's not really art, right? That's a product that you're making for a purpose. It's not purposeless. It's just egoless. And if it's egoless, I think it's not really art.
Is perception reality?
To the perceiver, it probably is. Uh, we can go down that everybody smoked one too many joints in the room and comes to the incredible observation that maybe the way you see orange is not the way I see orange. Like everybody's gone down that rabbit hole at some point.
Yeah.
Um, I think reality is an agreed upon shared perception.
That's amazing. Lily Tomlin said reality is just a collective hunch.
Yeah. Yes.
It's good.
Yeah.
Lewis Carroll said, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
I'm sure, although I probably would not confess that they were impossible. Uh,
You're a confident guy, aren't you?
no, it's not even that. I think like if you if you genuinely believe it, it doesn't seem impossible. It may seem highly unlikely. It may
That's
seem
the
improbable.
yeah.
Uh,
You're a good listener, Bruce, because you heard the word believe. You know, the word believe has the word lie in the middle of it.
yeah.
And Sun Ra actually got quoted in the New Yorker. The impossible attracts me because everything possible has been done and the world didn't change.
Well, yeah. So it depends on your perspective of possibility and impossibility.
Yeah,
There are things that are probably impossible in my daily life.
yeah,
Like it is, it is probably impossible that I don't know, my coffee cup will melt through the table
yeah,
just randomly. But it's not completely impossible.
yeah.
A quantum fluctuation could make it happen. It's not impossible that Mother Teresa will come back from the dead and walk into this room. I, is it likely? No. Is it impossible? I can't say it's impossible.
Well,
The that one of my favorite physicists is Sean Carroll.
yeah,
And Sean Carroll has a fantastic podcast that I'm going to plug called Mindscape. Mindscape.
yeah,
Um, and every month he does an Ask Me Anything to his Patreon patrons. And these Patreon patrons get to ask a question, any question. And any question that starts with, is it possible that blah, blah, blah? His response is always, if the question's going to start with, is it possible? I'm going to say yes,
yes,
because
yeah,
I can't say it's impossible. Science can never say something is impossible.
yeah.
It can say it has a very, very low likelihood of happening, but not that it's impossible.
My friends were married for 75 years. And when the husband died, a month after the death, I said, did Alfred appear to you anyway after you died? Just, I'm not saying kooky. I'm just wondering anyway. She goes, the day after he died, his coffee cup went like this. And it's almost like what you described. It's like, well, it could have been some heat or something in the room, but that's a little suspect, like the coffee cup just breaking out of the blue. So,
Yeah.
yeah, tell me one major element of Bruce's creativeness that stayed the same, and one major element that's changed in the many years you've been doing this.
My wife will tell you that no matter what I do and how I try and shake it, not that I intentionally try and shake it, but how I might try to distance myself from it from a practical point of view for a creative thing, there is always an element of punk rock in there.
All right.
And that's why going back to, you asked me if somebody could describe me in 2 words, my playing in
Yeah,
2 words, that one of the words is chaotic or something
yeah,
like that. Because if it doesn't have that in it, it's not me. It doesn't feel like me.
yeah,
And it could be a classical piece, it could be anything, it could be a jazz arrangement, but there's got to be a little something rough and tumble in there for it to feel right. And for something that's definitely changed, um, I I would like to think that um, that I'm less concerned with uh, anyone else's opinion about what I do.
yeah,
Um, you go through periods in your life where you write for some imaginary target audience,
yeah,
you know, and I think I've squashed most of that. There's obviously still some of that there. You don't. you know, you don't want everybody to hate what you
Yeah.
do. So, you make certain compromises or, you know, I don't know, adjustments
Yeah.
to the context in which you think your art will be heard,
Yeah.
um, so that it doesn't terrify the listener so much.
Yeah.
Uh, but I think I'm much, much, much less aware of that element in me than I ever have been.
Yeah. Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
Uh, I'm not sure. I'm going to put it in a musical context first, but I'm not sure that it doesn't apply to a lot of things. Uh, I I consider a lot of the music that I like to be something someone else might say is a guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that holds true for a lot of things that I like in my life. That I find great comfort and beauty in certain things that someone else might say is frivolous or
Yeah.
simplistic or whatever. And I think by me not thinking that they're guilty pleasures and me just loving them the way they are, I'm able to incorporate those things into my life in a meaningful way without feeling like it's cheesy.
Yeah.
So I love Barry Manilow.
Yeah.
There you go. I just said it. I love Barry Manilow.
Yeah.
Now, is that a guilty pleasure? No, it's a pleasure.
Yeah.
So the big modulation at the end of every Barry Manilow song, I love that. And I'm going to use it. And I'm going to use it non-ironically.
Yeah.
you know, and I feel that way about a lot of things in life. Like if you love something, like love it. Wear it on your sleeve.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. I like how you put that. And fill in the blank, Bruce. Anger can be a productive emotion
When you recognize that it's in you enough to not let it cloud your mind.
yeah.
Uh, it's unproductive when it prevents you from functioning at your best.
Yes.
But when you know it's there and know that it's going to be there, you can't just rationalize it away or whatever. It's there. Allow it to be there and use your emotions and not let them control you.
Very good. I asked my friend, can satire be destructive? He wrote comedy with Robin Williams. He says, that's the job of satire. But if me or you do a cartoon in a certain country and they kill us, some people think dying is destructive. Swift compared satire to a mirror in which people could see every face but their own. It reminds me of the Zappa line, watch the Nazis run your town. Now go home and check yourself. You think we're singing about somebody else.
Right.
What's the function of satire?
I think that's, as often was the case with Frank, he really cut to the core of it. I think the function of satire is after the smoke clears to give you a moment of introspection.
Yeah.
And when you're thinking about why something was so cutting, or why a particular comedian or author or whatever chose to skewer a particular target, take that moment to really understand what that means in the context of your world. Um, if you read satire, as opposed to just like seeing a TikTok video of a one-liner from a comedian, but if you read satire, you have that time, you have those moments to treat it like it's genuine, meaningful art and not just a one-liner.
Yeah.
And I think that's, that's the thing that is most subversive about it, is that when given the time to process it, it can directly affect you, and even if you're not the target of the satire.
Really well put, Bruce. That's two of Frank's heroes. Lord Buckley taught Lenny Bruce how to turn joke telling into storytelling. And that's really what you were describing there, like by reading, sussing it out, and not just one liners, just quick vaudevillian jokes. What's the most significant difference between women and men, physical aside?
So I think this is, sort of a cultural question, because I don't think it's inherent, for the most part, that there are grotesque differences between how men and women think. There are certainly some biological processing that is different between men and women, but much of that has to do with our environment and culture. The science, some of it is pretty dubious, but there's certainly some science that says men have evolved to see fast motion better than women, and women have evolved to see color better than men. And the anthropologist answer to that is that men had to go catch a wildebeest or kill a wildebeest, and women had to figure out which berries were poisonous. But that's an environmental and a cultural difference. That's not how your brain is wired from the start. And I think if you go to different cultures, you'll find that a lot of the things from a Western point of view about our stereotypes of male and female thought are different in other cultures. So I don't really think it's that way. I think in the West, certainly there are things roles that we've been pushed into, and expectations in those roles that we have. And I really think that is an important factor in the increase in the vocal nature of people who feel not like those stereotypes and not like those expectations. If you've been raised to say a man is this or a woman is this, and you don't feel that you are those things for a long time, you hid that, or as soon as you voiced it a little, you got ostracized by your peers. And one of the things that is really, I think, pleasing to me about the nature of how the reach of social media and things like that is that people are becoming more and more comfortable and feeling safer and safer to say, those things don't apply to me.
Yep.
So, I can tell you the difference between me and my wife, but I can't tell you whether that's because we're genetically man and male or female versus we were raised as American man and woman.
What caused matriarchy?
I think here's the difference between men and women. I think men have a great deal of awe and fear around the fact that women can birth children. And one thing that is actual real science is that when mothers are nursing infants, there is bidirectional hormonal activity that creates intense bonds between mother and child. And men can be fearful of that. Like that is something that is hard for us to wrap our heads around.
Yeah.
And if you're in a society where mothers are comfortable enjoying that strength and that ability, that you are more likely to get a matriarchal society where men are more willing to turn those reins over because they see the power inherent in a woman.
There's Oscar Wilde quote. He goes, women fret becoming their mothers, men don't, and that's their problem. And most of us were raised more by our moms than our dads.
Certainly, yeah, certainly.
You create what you resist. This is a saying that Bob Goldthwait morphed into you are what you hate. James Joyce said it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. And Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, thank God I'm an atheist. So this line, you create what you resist. I'm not saying Bruce, but one creates what one resists. What's your take on that line?
I'm not sure I've ever felt that. I feel like there's, it depends. It probably depends a lot on your upbringing.
Yeah.
I feel like if you're encouraged to be a free thinker when you're a child, or at least not discouraged from the opposite, that there's almost no sense of resistance to ideas. Because if you are raised to give every idea its sort of intellectual due and work through it and make your decisions about what your particular ethos is, then you're never really resisting something. If you're raised with a set of beliefs that are not to be impugned, then you have all of this baggage at the back of your head that maybe seems just like, well, that's what life and expectations are, and I want to fight against that. I think if you're raised in a situation where, and I'm not saying like you have to be a hippie, I'm just saying if you're in an intellectually open environment, there's much less for you to resist internally. And that's why I probably have never really felt that. I was never indoctrinated in anything.
Yeah. These are 5, and thanks for your time, Bruce. I got a few more and we're out of here, but this has
Sure.
really been enlightening for me. These are 5 quick Alan Watts questions, just off the top of your head in a couple words. First one, who started it all?
That's quite a question. I don't know about all. I think at every stage of human cultural evolution, there's probably a person that kicks off the next stage, and that person may not even be aware of it. It can be a butterfly effect where the person does something in a vacuum somewhere, and just one other person hears of it, and it does something. So I think with each epoch, right, there is a person, and that person just may never be the Ugg the caveman or a Nobel Prize winner or whatever you want to think. But there's a guy, I want to meet that guy. The first guy that said, you know what, I'm gonna get out of this tree.
I
Uh,
like I
that's a
like
good
that.
one.
It's the cult of personality. I've had people go, "Who started it all?" And they go, "Louis Armstrong." I go, "That's a great answer." We in our part one, I was saying, who's your three favorite funk and bass players? And I asked this guy once, "Who's your three favorite funk guitarist?" And he goes, "Whoever played behind Joe Tex." And I love that it wasn't a name and
Right.
he had to name the name. I mean, I went home and Googled it, but it was like, I just love the idea that we don't have to have this name, this cult of personality. Okay, the second
By
Alan
the way,
Watts.
the correct answer to who started it all is Johnny Guitar Watson.
Yeah. That's a high five for sure. I saw him rehearse with Frank once.
What a
That
treat.
guy that about his piano playing early in his career.
Yeah.
And then yeah, no, yeah, I ice pick in the forehead, all that.
That's,
Okay, here's the second Alan Watts. Are we going to make it?
I'm going to make it. I think we've covered that. The rest of you, I'm not so sure. I'll consider we as humanity, not a society.
Yeah.
We as a species. No. And I don't that doesn't mean to sound dire. All I'm saying is that the universe is actively trying to kill us at every turn. Um, the likelihood of such a young species as we are in the grand scheme of things being able to bridge to become like what is called a Kardashev level 3 civilization, where we leave this planet and our species colonizes the galaxy. We overcome interstellar distances and all of that stuff to survive. Um, the likelihood of that is super low.
Yeah.
So I'm not suggesting we're going to wipe ourselves out with nukes in 20 years. I'm suggesting that the life of the universe is a lot longer than the life of any species.
Yes. Well, I have to do a divert question out of the Alan Watts because I don't ask it very often. Are the laws of nature cruel?
No, they're just laws.
Yeah.
That's it. The laws of physics in the universe are completely agnostic.
Yeah.
They are what they are.
Yep. Okay, third Alan Watts, where do we put it?
Definitely not in my storage. There is no more room in my storage.
Okay, four, who's cleaning?
I actually have an answer to that. Where do we put
Okay,
it?
go ahead. Sorry.
I think we put it on the table for everybody else to look at.
Nice. I like it. Four, who's cleaning it up?
I'm cleaning it up.
Five.
I like doing that.
Good. Five, is it serious?
No.
All
No.
right. How do you find peace of mind, Bruce?
I mean, this is kind of a gimme of an answer. Like I find peace of mind when my children are happy.
Yeah.
Because hopefully they're going to be around longer than I am. Yeah. Even if I'm around a long, long time, hopefully they'll be around even longer. So if they're happy, I'm good.
Beautiful. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Nice. No.
Dude, you got to
no, I would say I would probably say don't change anything. Do what you're doing, even though it doesn't seem like there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Because it'll be okay. It'll be okay.
I asked Dr. John all these questions years ago. And when I got to that question, he goes, I won't go there. It's like a little too voodoo for him or something.
Well, like I often say to people, um, that I wouldn't really change. And like, there's lots of things that I would have wanted in in the moment to go differently in my
Yeah,
life. But if you like what your life is now at this moment, and I do, that's the end result of all the dumb stuff too. And if you change, I don't want to butterfly effect something and say, you know what, talk to the girl over there in the corner of your homeroom class
yeah,
that I would never talk to, because then my life would be wildly different.
yep.
And I don't want that. I like my life.
Which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
Oh, come on, over. This is not how. You're a monster if it goes under.
The patent has it
The
go,
patent has it over. Yeah.
but there are 10% of people I ask and they say under and they have their reasons.
One of my daughters is one of those people.
If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
Wow. Oh man. How I learned to stop worrying and love beer. I don't.
Oh, that is great. I just made a movie about the scene in Doctor Strangelove that's destroyed. They had a pie fight.
Yes, yes.
And I think the footage probably still exists.
Well,
But
Kubrick
they
was
want to,
really. Kubrick destroyed a lot of footage in a lot of the films.
well, that's what he says. Who
Well,
knows?
that's what he said, and he destroyed props and everything.
Yeah. Well, we'll someday it might pop up. Anyways, I'll show you my 2-minute film. It's a funny little take on that. So they want to scent the glue in the binding of your autobiography. What would the smell be?
So there's a few good answers that I have a rational backup for in. One is it smelled like sesame oil, because no matter what you put sesame oil in, I walk by and go, that smells delicious. But yeah, mine would probably smell like, soy sauce and beer.
I love sesame oil, soy sauce, and beer. That's good smells. They want to build a statue in your honor. Where would it be displayed and what would it be made of?
Well, first of all, I would not want a statue in my honor, so I would say it would be displayed at the bottom of the ocean, uh, and have it made of algae so that it just dissolved. I don't want that.
I get that answer. Okay, Bruce, tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Something good that I
It's
never had.
good, you never had it, but you never want it.
My sort of glib answer is a fancy car. I don't care about cars. I don't really like driving. And I never really wanted like a Lamborghini or anything.
Yeah.
And I live in a city that is full of potholes, so it's not practical. But I'm sure there's something, a little more cerebral than that. Good that I never wanted, and I never had, never wanted. I'm going to say siblings. I'm an only child.
That's good, and you never had it, and you never want it.
Yeah, I never really I occasionally flirted with the idea of, oh, it'd be fun to have a brother to go out and play wiffle ball with,
Yeah.
but I had friends, and I also had my parents' undivided attention.
Well, that's the answer I get the most. Money, fame, and heroin.
Well, I'm not sure heroin is good. That's the
I
thing.
know, but it is weird that's the answers I get the most. Okay, if you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Oh, this is easy. This happened to me last week. Uh,
That is a
uh, I'm certain that I would make some kind of Schwarzenegger-like quip. Um, you know, this day just got shittier. So
Arnold Quip. That is so cool. You know, he rides his bike every Sunday and the right off the boardwalk in Venice. And there's this guy he worked with who wrote a screenplay and made movies in Hollywood, and the CIA bumped this guy off. I mean, it sounds like a kooky conspiracy, but you can read about it, blah blah
oh
blah.
yeah.
And I want to like zoom my bike right up along Arnold and go, Arnold, you know what happened to that guy? Just like really casual and see either he'd go kill me on the spot, his bodyguard would push me away, or he might just on the spot go, oh, I'll tell you what I think, you know. But it's probably not a good move, but I would really love to, you know.
Yeah, I suggest you don't shadow Arnold on your bike. I think that's a
But
safe.
Bruce, you will love this. How many people I've done that on the boardwalk? So I go up to Stevie Tyler once, roller skate, and I goes, dude, you put a Zappa line in one of your songs. I was buns up wheeling and dealing. Why did you do that? And they paid, Aerosmith paid the publishing. I says, why'd you do that? And he goes, that's the way I felt that day. Then I went up to Jack White. Is it White? Yeah, Jack White. And I said, what's a punk ass kid like you from Detroit getting into Beefheart? And he looked at me like, what? And then, you know, we had this 10-minute talk, and he was really cool because, you know, he's like, you know, he likes sort of great music.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's one of the things that I always find interesting about music that I like that's a little bit outside of the norm is finding other people who would be the last person you would expect to even know that thing existed.
Yeah.
And that's happened to me with Beefheart on numerous occasions.
Is it really? Yeah, Beefheart's like Robert Plant was in a restaurant once, and he said, like, could you play some better music? And they go, what would you like us to play? And he goes, Captain Beefheart. No, I was lucky. Beefheart called me 52 times in 1991, once a week in the middle of the night. And it was an amazing thing. And I couldn't tape it, so I took notes
Right.
laying in bed, and I lost the Beefheart phone log, and it's been my destiny. I've got to find it someday, you know. So a couple more. What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
So we touched on it a little bit about the freedom that some people are having to express their differences, but I feel like just in general, I see in young people, and I mean now, like say 13 to 18, that having grown up in the internet age where everything you see, read, whatever is suspect and requires critical thought to process.
Yeah.
That these kids are really good at it.
Yeah.
The thing that older people struggle with is, you know, finding a way to process multiple biased accounts of things and build their own unbiased account. These kids are great at it. And I think that is the thing that's going to save the future.
Bruce, you nailed it. My friend brought my awareness to that very point, which you articulated so well. It's called TSA, tactile situation awareness. When the bomber pilot, well, when the pilot in the airplane gets bombed, he looks at his gauges and he has to make quick split decisions. He can't study everything. And my friend said kids nowadays have so many things that they don't necessarily identify with just TikTok or just this or just that. You know, we had our transistor radio where we kind of zoomed in on certain things, but they're so widespread that they have sort of that tactile situational awareness where
Yeah,
they're
they're
looking at the big picture. Yeah.
right. They're their own aggregator. They don't
Yeah.
need someone else to aggregate things for
Yeah.
them.
Their own aggregate. That is great. Okay. So, what's a question that remains unresolved for you?
There's a lot of them. Um, I mean, I think probably the overarching question from I don't have a lot of questions with regards to like metaphysical things that I need to have answered because I'm comfortable with not knowing answers like that.
Yeah.
Uh, I think the question that I would have is a little more introspective, um, and that is, have I said what I need to say?
Wow. That's good.
Because that's what drives you to work. You know, if there's always an element of feeling like you have something more to say, then you got a reason to wake up in the morning.
I'm going to use that one. I like that. Have I said what I need to say? That is good. I love that. How has playing, working with music shaped your behavior?
So it's different over decades of my life. You know, when you're a kid and you're playing in bands, and you know, if you're at all remotely successful and you have people that want to come see you play and things like that, it very much becomes your entire identity. Is that? Um, then you know you get a little older and it becomes something you do while at the same time, you know, juggling your family or trying to make a living or whatever. So it becomes more a tool and a skill that you have that allows you to have grown up life, you know. um, and then when you get to a point that it's you're good enough at doing the things in your life that support the balance of your normal life, then it becomes a thing that you can enjoy as an enhancement to your life.
Yeah.
Um, and then you get to a point like I am now, where I'm in my, you know, whatever you want to call it, third act of life or whatever, where it's almost come full circle, where you allow it to then be your primary identity again, because
Wow.
you have the freedom to put all of your energies into it. Your kids are grown up, your house is paid off, whatever things, you know, that you no longer have to juggle. You now have that freedom to really indulge in it the way you indulged in it when you were a kid.
Yeah. Beautiful. So Thornton Wilder said in 1928, art is confession, art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You've laid your cards on the table for over 4 hours. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
So I'm a person that always wants to have a little bit in, held in my hand,
Yeah,
that I can dole out as I see fit. I don't want to tell the whole joke all at once.
that's it. Right.
Uh,
That's what Thornton's saying with that quote.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I feel like there should be always just a little bit of a wink at the end, saying that's not. We had a good time, but that's not the end of it.
My wife is like that. She'll get a standing ovation and her partner will go, let's do an encore. And she goes, nope. Now, she's not being snotty, but she knows, leave them wanting more, But that is, I
That's
love that. I love the word leave a little of a wink because that
yeah.
that implies like, what's the function of laughter?
I think it's really to be able to share and participate in a moment. Like
Yeah.
you can be a joke writer
Yeah.
and write a joke and go, that's funny, and send it off to, out of the writer's room. But if somebody laughs at it in front of you, you're sharing it. You're in this together because you want to laugh too.
That's it. I love it. Um, what gives you the most optimism?
I'm going to fall back a little bit on uh, Kurt Vonnegut, who's one of my favorite authors, and he declared himself a humanist. That he had love for the species and strong belief in the underlying goodness of humanity. And what gives me the most optimism is that I'm aligned with that. I feel like there are small segments of our species, of our culture, whatever, that can be overcome by the underlying goodness of humanity. I believe it's there. I Sometimes it's hard to see it, uh, especially when we're basically now pummeled with information that we, in prior eras, we would not really be aware of in our day-to-day life. So we would have generally more happily ignorant interactions with people. But I still believe in the overall goodness of people and the desire of the majority of the species to be good to one another and to be altruistic and to help out their fellow man when needed. It's always hard to do in certain circumstances. We see it all the time when people in power want to bomb other people in other power and things like that. But I do believe that one of the reasons that we're still on the planet is because of the species having a relatively altruistic nature, and I think that's what gives me optimism. It gives me hope.
It's really beautiful. There's a Kurt Vonnegut doc that just came out. If you haven't seen it, you got to see it. The guy spent 40 years making it.
Wow, I have not seen it. I've seen a couple of older ones, but I have not seen a new one.
It's Robert Whitey's Weide. He made the Woody Allen doc. He made the
Uh-huh.
Marx Brothers doc, the best Lenny Bruce doc. I mean, he's the guy, and he spent 40 years. And then when Kurt died, he was like blown out, and it was hard for him to put it together. But he finally put it out, and Kurt is an amazing, important person indeed. He looked at a cigarette pack and he goes, "It says if I keep smoking, it will kill me, and I'm still alive. I'm going to sue them."
Well, my kids gave me a book of Kurt's artwork,
Oh yeah.
and I get an entirely different kind of joy, but a just as powerful kind of joy looking at his art, his
Oh yeah.
and this I think goes back to this idea of what we have in us and how we get it out of us is so uniquely individual
Yeah.
that you take somebody whose primary voice is in the written word, and then he picks up a set of colored pens and
Wow.
is able to express the same internal
Wow.
things through a different medium is incredible.
It is. It's beautiful. He's just like, and you really see the humanity of Kurt in this doc. I really highly recommend it. So, the first question I asked you was, "What's the best thing for a human being?" And Wilhelm Reich said, "The best thing for a human being is another human being." And the last question is, "What gives you the most optimism?" And that's what they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life, and he says, "Other people." So it's been more than overwhelming and truly enlightening to spend over 4 hours with you, Bruce. And I really do hope we can meet in person someday, and I can see you play music live. Next time you're in LA, please let me know. And
Well, I expect to be there certainly in the spring, so
right,
I will keep you posted.
yeah, keep me posted. And because music language, could we do a coda? And I ask you a couple more favorite music questions, like
Yeah,
last.
sure.
Okay, I asked you, the three favorite or good funk people, funk bass players that had an impact on you. This time, I'd like it to be jazz guitarists and funk guitarists. So your three favorite funk guitarists, or who had impacts on you.
So, as sort of a punk rock kid
Yeah,
and a metal kid,
yeah,
um, I was a little behind the curve of knowing the names of people.
yeah,
Um, and so like I didn't know who was playing guitar in P Funk or who
yeah,
was playing guitar on, oh shoot, well I won't be able to say the band, but in Earth Wind and Fire or in
yeah,
whatever. Um, so what started dragging me in that direction and making me uh, circle back on funk in general was when I first heard Prince
yeah,
in probably 78, 79.
yeah,
Like 79 was controversy, I guess. So it was
yeah,
right before that Dirty Mind. And that like woke me up. And then
yeah.
somebody told me, well, all Prince is trying to be is Sly Stone.
Wow.
And I said, well, I know Sly and the Family Stone songs. I certainly listened to them as a kid on the radio,
Yeah,
but they were just part of, again, my sort of like youthful awareness of
yeah,
music and not like something that I got deeply into.
yeah,
And then I went back and listened to Sly Stone,
yeah.
and boy, did that have a powerful impact.
Oh yeah,
Uh, because not only was it funky guitar playing, but the music was so deep, and there was so much going on. Um, so those two definitely. And then I just want to go like way forward in time to to a guy who now, would you call him a funk guitarist? No, but he's a funky guitarist, and I just love the sound of his guitar. And it's Corey Wong,
yeah. Oh
from
yeah. Right.
from Wolfpack.
Oh yeah.
And of course Corey is third, fourth generation funk
Oh yeah.
guitarist, right? He's copying all the stuff from other
Oh yeah.
people's records, but he's bringing a thing to it that's very different. He's bringing this tightness
Yeah.
and arrangement into this sort of jam band kind of context, which has typically been just like
Yeah.
kind of messy. He's
Yeah.
bringing this precision and depth, and I really, really dig it.
No, I saw Buzzy fight and play that white funk with Stevie Wonder in Ann Arbor. And
Yeah.
that's what inspired me. I says, white dudes can play as funky as black dudes. I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, no, that was good. Now, but let's go to now I want to know your 3 punk, 3 metal, and 3 jazz guitarists.
All right. So I'm gonna lump the Stranglers into punk rock, even though they're their own kind of thing.
Right, and in punk and metal, you don't have to say guitarist, just the group. So Stranglers is one of your
Oh, well,
yeah.
I mean, I'm going for guitarists because
Okay,
that's
good. Stay in guitar then.
so Hugh Cornwell from the
Yes,
Stranglers
yes.
to me um is this incredible combination of the angular kind of sound of Tom Verlaine, right,
Yes.
with the classic rock informed playing style of British, British invasion rock,
Yeah.
with this sort of um, intense lack of fear of the wrong note.
Nice. Wow.
There are so many notes in his parts that I would never have
Yeah.
played, because I would have been like, well, yeah, the bass is playing the minor third here and he's playing the major third. That's you can't, that's not a shouldn't be doing that. Don't do that. But it's what makes that music sound great. So yeah, so
No, that wait, we got to stay on that for a second because the lack of fear of wrong notes, for me, it's Sonny Chirac, Pete Cozy, Mark Rebo, and Elliot Ingberg.
oh yeah,
You know,
yeah.
those 4 guys, because Elliot, he was playing guitar, he's on the cover of Freak Out.
Right. Yes.
And
Yes.
and he wrote "Don't Bogart That Joint, My Friend," and I got to
That's right.
I got to befriend him a little. Right now, he'd answer the phone like this, "What?" He was the most authentic beat I ever, but he's playing guitar, in Alice in Blunderland is like Sonny Chirac playing with Beefheart, and there's no solos in Beefheart's albums, and Beefheart let Elliot play a solo,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he's playing guitar at the Monkey's house, and Hendrix is sitting next to Elliot, and his jaw is on the floor. And Elliot turns and starts talking to his amplifier. Okay, so there's
So
one punk rock guitarist, 2
so
more.
the other is hold on, I'm gonna is for a minute I blanked on his name, is Dr. No from the Bad Brains.
Really?
Oh,
Wow.
yeah. Um, I I used to see the Bad Brains all the time at
Ni
CBGB's when I was a kid. I
Wow.
mean, not even a kid, like
Yeah,
I'm talking about I was already 20.
yeah.
Uh, uh, and no band has ever exceeded the power of that band to me.
Wow, that is good to hear.
I've seen other bands, extremely powerful bands, but Bad Brains were no one eclipsed them ever.
Are they DC based?
They were, yeah, they came from DC.
Yes. Wow.
And Dr. No lives up in Woodstock. He's kind of a hippie now, but yeah, so that's definitely
Okay,
definitely
a third punk rock guitarist.
uh, now we're getting into the I don't want to leave somebody out thing. So let's see.
Well, we should do a salon on well, what I'd love to have you in one of our Zappa salons.
Oh yeah.
Where we have
All right.
like 4 or 5 or 6 people, but yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to say this
Yeah.
name because he's not just a great guitarist, because he is a great guitarist, but he was really, really important and meaningful to me in building my style.
Yeah.
And that's a guy named Jason Wilkins.
Yeah.
And Jason was the lead guitar player in the Sick Fucks before I was in the Sick Fucks.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And when I when I used to go see them, I would try and figure out everything that he was doing and emulate everything he's doing. And he's still one of my really best friends. He's just a wonderful guy, still plays his ass off, and has a guitar collection that you would swoon over.
Wow.
And he was in a number of punk rock bands in the Lower East Side, and at the time, but I used to see him all the time. And the other person that I'm gonna throw in there is a guy named Jeff Salen, who was the guitar player in the Tough Darts, which was also another meaningful band to me. So there you go.
How about metal? 3 metal guitarists.
Tony Iommi.
Yep.
Number one. There's not even close. Like, head and shoulders. He invented metal, as far as I'm concerned. And now we're going to get into like questions of what's metal.
Yeah.
Because is Zeppelin metal? I don't know. They're hard rock.
Yeah. Yeah. You can say Zeppelin's metal enough. Yeah.
Yeah. But so Richie Blackmore.
Yep.
You can say that's metal. I'm gonna go with that.
Yep.
And there was a time when like AC/DC was considered metal, but they're not. They're like blues rock. But you know what? So was early Black Sabbath. So I'm going with it. I'm going with, and I'm not going to say Angus. I'm going to say Malcolm Young.
Nice. Dude, I so respect your talk here, because you it's not so much opinion based as knowing a bigger picture. I like to talk intellectually about guitars, but when it comes down to it, it's like, what does your gut say? And like just saying the comments you did on Al Di Meola, totally understand, and I hear some of the jazz rock fusion that I grew up on when we started hearing Herbie Hancock and Weather Report, and some of it sounds dated.
Sure,
and,
yeah.
And it doesn't mean it's not good. It's just my own taste. Okay, now to close out.
By the way, Jerry, I was at the Ritz in '81 when Di Meola sat in with Frank.
Yeah.
And I was well aware who Al Di Meola was, of course. And the saddest part about that whole situation for me was that Frank didn't play side by side with Al.
Yeah.
He only had his one amp, and Al plugged into Frank's amp, and Frank just sat and watched. But because I would have loved to see the yin and yang of Frank and Al playing side by side.
Well, the other thing is Jerry Garcia and Frank should have jammed. I was at a show in Chicago where Jerry Garcia band opened for Frank. And here was a phenomenon. Zappa fans are snooty, I know it. Deadheads, in the middle of Frank's solos, they would start clapping. Zappa heads didn't clap in the middle. And then for Frank to say the line, "I'll tighten my headband during Jerry's guitar solo for an extra rush." They would have, I mean, literally, when we heard Overnight, I said, you could take 3 seconds, or actually that show in Chicago, I said, you could take 3 seconds out of a Frank solo and 3 seconds out of Jerry and put them together, and they would sound very similar. But Frank's out of urban blues and Jerry's out of country blues, but
Correct,
they were both loud psychedelic guitarists.
Yeah. And it all just comes down to, there's good and bad music. There's not, I would love to hear, look, I'm waiting for AI to do something like really interesting to me, which would be take a Willie Nelson song and put Frank in it or whatever, because there are great musicians in different genres that never crisscross and probably would have made something incredible.
Yeah, no, you see, you did it. Billy Childs is it Childs or Childish? The whiz kid guitarist who's the band. He just played a couple days ago. He opened the song with the Johnny Cash and then went into a Voodoo Child and then went back to the Johnny Cash. He did it. You know, Plunderphonics, John Oswald put Charlie Parker and James Brown together and mixed them together. And he did that way before mashups. But have you seen that mashup where they take Black Sabbath and Aretha Franklin?
Aretha, yeah, and the Supernaut, yeah.
That is fucking amazing.
It's,
but that
is it's Chain of Fools over Supernaut, yeah.
That is like, to me, it's okay. Now 3 jazz guitarists.
So, you know, again, my awareness of names of people,
yeah,
didn't come till later.
Yeah,
you know, and it kind of started in that era where George Benson started having like pop hits.
Yeah.
And then I would go back and I'd listen to, you know, to prior things. And so I'm going to say George Benson because of that, because
cool.
Incredible guitar player. And like, you know, most people's awareness of him was on pop records, not on bebop records. And he was a legit bebop guitar player, you know. And then the one person that just like, I'm utterly astonished by, for multiple reasons. One, because he was an incredible player, but two, because of how he physically played the instrument, was Charlie Christian.
Oh my God, I just wrote down right there, Charlie Christian.
And then the third is Django.
Yeah.
Django's the Einstein to me of jazz guitar.
Yeah. No, you nailed it. That was amazing. Because, you know, all these guys in LA now, I just saw one of them yesterday play at this jazz festival, and they're all Grant Green. And it's all good because that's where George Benson came out of Grant. And then basically Frank came out of the same school. He came out of Wes. Frank loved Wes Montgomery.
And I mean, Wes Montgomery's incredible.
Yeah. And Wes is sort of like, well, they left Wes behind and they're more Grant Green. But the guy I want you to hear, Nadav Paled, who's on my funk song I'm going to send you, he's Grant Green and Leo Nascitelli. And he didn't come out of the blues. He's from Israel. He does it like everybody's rooted in the blues. And when you're not rooted in the blues, what do? You go to some Arabic kind of scale like Frank was doing. He was playing these weird scales besides coming out of Guitar Slim and Johnny Guitar.
Right. Once he figured out the modal stuff that appealed to his ear, he immediately incorporated it into his playing. And you hear it right around, you know, Chunga's Revenge in Transylvania Boogie and things like that. He was like became obsessed with the Eastern modes. Yeah.
Have you ever heard Warren Cucurullo play Transylvania Boogie at a Tower Records free live in Hollywood? It's on YouTube.
I'll have to check that out.
And I mean, Warren just is. It's just he's playing. It's like Hunter Thompson typing out The Great Gatsby. He's just playing. But the comment he says is so good. He says, when Frank came out with Transylvania Boogie, everybody was Jeff Becked out. Like, oh, Jeff Beck. Listen to what Frank did.
Yeah. You know, I've come to appreciate Jeff Beck greatly over time, but I never really listened to Jeff Beck records when I was a kid, with the exception of what's the one where he's blurry on the front, the
Blow by Blow.
Blow by Blow, yeah. But like, I got it, but you know, the last thing I really wanted to listen to at that time was that fusion-y sort of stuff. I think if I heard a Fender Rhodes, it like bummed me out. Like there's something.
You know, that's great, because when Jeff died, I went in the Jeff rabbit hole, and I was like, I love Jeff Beck in a way, but another way, he was one of those the guys who felt dated, but he was a trick player, as tricks. But my favorite story is Candy Zappa. Well, you guys work with Candy, right?
Oh yeah, we've done a lot of stuff.
Candy was in the kitchen once, and Frank introduced Jeff Beck to Candy and said, "This is the greatest guitarist in the world," to Candy. Like, oh my God. But
except for Punky Meadows, who's more
yeah,
fluid than Jeff Beck.
more fluid. Well, you know the inside joke there?
I mean,
No, the inside joke I will literally tell you, because this should be on a podcast. Jeff Beck liked girls peeing on him.
yeah.
So when he says more fluid than Jeff Beck, it sounds like fluidness in your guitar playing, but it literally it's meaning more urine.
Well, there are several shows that I have bootlegs of where Terry is a little more descriptive in that he doesn't just sing he's more fluid than Jeff Beck.
He
says,
does explain it.
Yeah, he says it. Terry kind of alludes to that.
Alludes. That's good. Okay, last question, Bruce. I promise, because this is so. There's a big article in the New York Times said how oh my God, our rock heroes are all turned weirdo. Like Eric Clapton, Van Morrison are anti-vax. Now, believe me, I've drank the Kool-Aid, but now I'm not getting any more vaxes. I never got the flu vax, and I respect people's opinions both way, but you know science. We all went along with the science. And I didn't like that they would go and do that. And this article's like, oh my God, these people are going to these concerts. And one of the concert goers go, look it, I didn't come here to have this musician shape my behavior in the words of politics. I came here to appreciate his music. So they were doing that key thing, separate the art from the artist. And then, mentioning Taylor Swift, she could literally help Biden get elected by going, follow me. She has that kind of power, and they know that. They've already talked about it. What about the musicians' influence on a platform, having a political platform? What's your feelings on it? I know it's a huge can of worms, but it is like this article in the paper today just made me, well, I wonder what Bruce would say.
So I go sort of back and forth on this.
Yeah.
And I feel like if the easy answer, right, is if you have a platform, you should use it responsibly.
Yes.
But at the same time, I'm a musician. Why should anybody listen to what I have to say? As I should be able to say whatever I want, and everybody should take it with a grain of salt. I'm not a scientist. I'm not Einstein. I'm not whatever. I wouldn't. If I'm going to just like throw a random name, like if Ryan Reynolds said to me I should think a certain thing, I'd be like, you're Ryan Reynolds. Why would I listen to you? I like your movies. I think you're funny. I think whatever. But what would make you think that should influence me? Yeah. Where it gets blurry and weird, and also weird in multiple directions, and I'm going to circle around to this, is when you have fans that have hung on every word that you have written over the course of perhaps decades. Yeah. Right. You have a lot of impact on those people, almost like you're a parent. Yeah. Right. Especially if your fans grew up on your music, as we always say, right? So I know I grew up on Beatles records or on whatever. And what a Beatle had to say carried much more weight to me than what some of my peers might say. Yeah. But is that their fault or is that my fault? Are we, is our responsibility to to maybe not look at public figures that way,
Yeah.
and think a little more critically for ourselves.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets really strange. I'm very frequently encountering people who profess to be huge fans of, pick an artist. Pick an obvious one, like Frank Zappa,
Yeah.
who had a pretty clear political stance in his music from day one. Not
Yeah.
It didn't like creep in the
Yeah.
90s, no, it was there from 1965 through 1993. It's there.
Yeah.
People who claim to be enormous fans of his that have completely opposite viewpoints,
Yeah.
and are angered when this is brought to their attention. Like, have you not been listening this whole time?
Yeah.
Like, what is it that makes you a fan
Yeah.
of somebody? And what is it that makes now let's extrapolate that out. What is it that makes a person an acolyte of somebody, regardless of what position they are in the world?
Yeah.
Is it a willingness to overlook the things that don't agree with your position and only cherry pick the things that do? Is it just a desire to have someone to follow? I don't know. This is to get McLuhan or get a sociologist in here, to answer these questions. But we find, like, I found it a lot with Todd Rundgren, right? Where Todd has also been very, very clear through most of his life about the things that he cares about, and his desire to, to have a world where everybody just loves everybody, and smokes a little weed, and has a good time.
Yeah.
And yet you have people who are maybe staunch right-wing people coming to a show and then being annoyed that Todd says something anti-Republican or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, did you miss the last 40 albums? Did you maybe come here just because one day you heard "Hello, It's Me" and that's it? Like, and so there's a very famous little interview snippet of Todd in 2016 or 2017 being interviewed on Fox News, and him saying, if you are a Republican, probably don't come to my show, because you're not going to have a good time, and I don't want you to not have a good time at my show. And so, to me, that's actually, as weird as that is, it's actually the kind of way I think you should treat the platform that you have.
Yeah.
You should say, hey, I'm not going to tell you what to believe. I'm just going to tell you, this is what I think. And if that's going to bum you out at my show, then don't come. It's cool. We're cool if you do. What I don't want is you to come and walk out grumbling and be mad that you spent $50 to see me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's the responsibility you have when you have a platform, is saying, here's my position. You don't have to agree with me. Here's what my position is informed on. And if you want to do your own critical thinking based on that and choose to agree or disagree with me, we're good together.
That was beautiful, because McLuhan was saying, let's invent new questions and new metaphors. And Cage really nailed it. He goes, that's a very good question. I wouldn't want to ruin it with an answer.
Yeah.
So you're saying, like, take the responsibility to have a fruitful discussion and not, divide and conquer, where we can exchange ideas.
I don't, I try not to in my life. Like, it's really been hard lately, because everything is very black and white, apparently, much of the world, right? But I try to be in a position where I get my my mindset on understanding that under normal circumstances, two people are not going to agree on a lot of things.
Exactly.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
As long as that is an ideological disagreement, and it doesn't fall into the well of harming someone else. If it's just, hey, I believe in this, you believe in this, I don't want to get vaccinated, you don't have to. I want to, great. You
Yeah.
can,
Yeah.
that's great. That's good discourse. Not
Yeah.
you think, or there's something wrong with you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that was heavy because I was wondering, were you with Todd when he did America Drinks and Goes Home and he reworded Camarillo Barillo?
Uh, so 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 Camarillo Brillo, which became Mar-a-Lago Brillo, uh,
Yeah.
uh, was on the set list for the first show that I played with Todd.
First ever.
Yeah,
Wow.
but we didn't do it. We didn't get to it because the set list was not a set list. It was 70 songs
Yeah.
that he was going to call, at whatever songs he called, and that was on the list, but he didn't call it.
Wow.
But it's because we were playing on a cruise, and I suspect that a good portion of the audience on the cruise probably didn't want to go down a political rabbit hole.
Okay, closing out, Bruce. Did you hear the new Beatles song?
So, okay, I heard the new Beatles song.
The video too?
I haven't seen the video because
Okay.
I find that unsettling.
Okay.
I'll give you my hot take on the Beatles single. I'll give you the positives and the negatives. The positives are, I think John sounds beautiful on it. As a big, big, big John specifically fan, I love to hear him that clearly in that context. Everything else is fine.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Does it thrill me? No.
Yeah.
It's fine. I'm a little irked that they cut the bridge of the demo out, because I thought the bridge was really nice.
Yeah.
But I think what it's missing, mostly what I'm missing as a fan from it, is the sense of urgency that comes from the four of their personalities in a room duking it out.
Yeah.
And figuring out their place in the world of that song together.
Yeah.
Particularly the fact that it was typically in a room like Abbey Road Studio 3, where they recorded all the time, that was their clubhouse.
Yeah.
And they would work through it and create something. And it also would sound like that room was they always talk about the dumb quote of like, New York City is a character in this film. Well, you know what? The studio in Abbey Road is a character in a lot of the Beatles songs. It does provide a thing. And I think it lacks something from being recorded at Paul's house.
Wow.
It lacks this element of reality from it. And if you want to pick nits, I don't like that Paul tried to do a faux George slide solo, not because Paul's not a great guitarist, because he's a great guitarist when he's sounding like Paul. When he's trying to sound like George, it sounds like weak George.
Yeah.
I would have rather him summon Jeff Lynne or something.
Yeah.
To play it, or just Paul play it like a Paul solo, like Taxman or like whatever.
Yeah.
But it's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine.
You got a great attitude. Well, this has sure been, as Frank said, fine, super fine. Thank you, Bruce, so much. I hope we can continue talking forever and ever. McLuhan said, communication of the new is a miracle, but it's not impossible.
Yeah.
And you've really communicated a lot of newness to me. I'm so grateful for your time and energy and all your music. Thank you so much, Bruce.
Well, I'm grateful for your thoughtful questions. You really you got me thinking about stuff that I haven't really thought about. So,
well, that's what it's all about. And stay in touch. And I'm going to hit the end broadcast button now. But like I said, I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever.
I'm down.